What is up, cinephiles? Welcome back to Screen Kings. Eternals just got a theatrical release here in the country a couple of days back, so this non-spoiler review comes to you a bit late, but I wouldn't pass up the opportunity to talk about the most racially diverse casting in a superhero film ever. So let's talk about Eternals. Basically, they're a group of immortal beings that have lived on Earth way back 5000 BC, and they help shaping the history and all of the civilizations that followed thereafter. This one is directed by Chloé Zhao, Oscars 2021 Best Director, who also directed the Oscars Best Picture of the Year, Nomadland. Now, on paper, it doesn't seem that she's the most obvious choice in helming an MCU film, because if you've seen her work in Nomadland, it's more focused on the poetic understatement, the naturalistic performances, all the subtleties in the life of a nomad. So it doesn't seem to complement well when you're talking about an MCU film that's all about the action spectacle, bombastic CGIs. But then again, Marvel has time and again proven that it is their best decision to go and seek out these new breed indie filmmakers just to give a fresh perspective in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Also, to give them a chance to have a next big step in their careers by helming this big budget blockbuster films. No matter how you feel about this movie, I can tell that this project is fully owned by Chloé Zhao. I can see her imprint throughout this film. It didn't affect that she's just jumping from basically an indie film to Marvel's next big thing featuring a bunch of heroes which, if we're being honest, not really known to the public. So this is a big task for her, introducing a bunch of characters that we really don't know and providing them storylines and backstories. So I'm going to start off first with something that no one will disagree with me, and that has to be the cinematography of this movie. It is amazing, it is spectacular, and I think it's for the best that Chloé Zhao decided to shoot most of the film in real life locations as compared to most Marvel films that are shot in sound stages and green screen. You also got some scenes here that involve green screens, no doubt, but in here most part of the film is shot in real life locations, so it adds to the immersiveness, making the film more grounded, and maybe utilizing her natural skill for getting that natural lighting. And even if the locations are mostly shot on Earth, what's amazing is there is a cosmic feel into it. So I love the two-dimensionality that I'm getting with all the cinematography here, because you got a lot of stunning shots of the landscapes and all of the wonderful imagery that this movie brings. This is the least Marvel when it comes to adhering to the Marvel formula, so that might not sound pleasing to the regular viewer because it's not your conventional crowd pleaser like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'm actually one of those people that celebrates the fact that this is something different from what we've seen before. Now, this movie, it's less on action, it's more of storytelling and world building, and it's understandable because this is new material and we're talking about material that spans over the centuries. So we got different stories here coming from the past and the present. Most of the present day story here is the Eternals forming together to solve this new emerging threat, and most of the story from the past is how they disbanded, or the Eternals at their prime. Where did they come from? If you're going to look at the growth of the characters, you have to look it from a larger scale, starting from the 5000 BC to the present. Also, when it comes to the main conflict of the story, it's more complex, or it's harder to wrap your head around it, because basically, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm gonna be as vague as I can, but there's a choice here between following the master plan versus going against it. It's basically the theme of predestination versus free will. So I like that we're getting something different here, because as much as I love MCU films, I felt like we have been spoon-fed of these simple good versus evil stories. Well, we got villains that are multi-layered and complex to make you feel conflicted, but by the end of the day, you know which side you're going to side against or side with. So in here, it's much different because the main predicament here is just harder if you're going to put yourself in the shoes of the Eternals, because I think the movie really did a great job in weighing the pros and cons of going in one direction versus the other direction. This movie is more philosophical and spiritual, I dare say, than your usual Marvel film. It has these existential questions of what it means to be a human, or in their case also a god and a superhero. So do they answer to their calling? Do they have their allegiance to the people that they have started to love over the years? So this is a type of a Marvel film that asks a lot of questions rather than giving answers. So it might frustrate the viewers, but personally I like this approach because it's quite different. Because in most Marvel films, you're just reacting to what's happening, to what's thrown at you. In here, you have time to think. There's still a dash of humor here, most prominent in the character of KINGO. So when you get those doses of humor, it still reminds you that, hey, this is still an MCU film because we got the humor. So that being said, it is up to you to decide whether you feel like this MCU is kind of holding back the movie from what it wants to be, which is somehow an art house blockbuster like what Dune does. Now let's address the big elephant in the room here, because one of the characters in this film will start to question, or maybe you yourself are questioning, why does the Eternals didn't really interfere when it comes to saving the world from Thanos when he snapped his finger and erased half of the universe from their existence. So the Eternals here follow a commandment, which is they cannot interfere to any man-made conflict. So they stayed silent when it comes to Thanos' threat, but you can't help but think, because it's still wild that they didn't really do anything, because some of the Eternals here have their own families which are composed of mortal beings, so why they can afford to stand back. So that really is something that I can't seem to reconcile. I honestly struggle to understand even after watching this movie, so that might be an obstacle for you to fully embrace that existential crisis that they're just having right now. Now let's talk about the casting here. As I've said, it's so diverse, it's so representative of many people, and not only when it comes to race, but also when it comes to gender, orientation, and also disability. So it's important for me that these characters are not only perceived as token characters, and thankfully Zhao gives them a personality of their own. First, they are initially defined by their superpowers, but there's depth to this character. There's depth to the performances that are delivered by all of the excellent cast here. I'm going to do a roll call. We have Gemma Chan, who plays Cersei, Ikaris, played by Richard Madden, Ajax, played by Salma Hayek, Sprite, played by McHugh, KINGO, played by Kumail Nanjiani, Tina, played by the one and only Angelina Jolie, Gilgamesh, played by Don Lee, Fastos, played by Brian Tyree Henry, Makari, played by a real-life deaf person, Lauren Ridloff, Druid, played by Barry Keoghan. Then there's another character here, played by Kit Harington, Date Windmant, who doesn't get a lot of exposure, but he might as well have this big glowing side in his forehead that says, I'm going to be important later. You have a bunch of characters. Some people might not like that we have a 2.5-hour film. They feel like it's too long, it's too dragging, but for me, it feels justified. Looking at the trailer, there's some sort of biblical revisionism happening in here, so I'm really drawn to that, and knowing that I'm going to spend more hours in this world building that they have built is a pleasant treat for me. So I didn't mind that. I actually like that they have a longer film here. And honestly, frankly speaking, I think this movie could have used maybe 20 or 30 extra minutes, because I felt like there are some scenes that are just brushed through. Like for example, the relationship of Ikaris and Cersei here. They are lovers. It's heavily influenced by Chloe Zhao's approach to have a nuanced character relationship, because we just know, it's just presented in the movie that they are in love over the centuries. So it's more on the lingerings and their stares that you know that they have feelings for each other, but maybe as a regular viewer, you need to know the reason why they fell in love in the first place. So the movie does not really provide that reason. The movie could have spent more time on it, because it's one of the hearts of the story and it will have a significant impact on the third act. But nevertheless, there's a good chemistry among the cast. I really bought that there are family to begin with, but I can't help to think that maybe if Chloe Zhao just trimmed the characters by 2 or 3, maybe they will be given more time for character development and character growth. Just look at Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn just used 5 core main characters. So in here, I think there's a trade-off because if you use more characters, it increases representation, and I think it's important for a viewer to see themselves being represented on the screen. But by doing so, you're giving less time for this character. So when it comes to my rooting interest for them, it's not as strong. There's this distant feel to them. Maybe it's meant to be that way because they're gods after all. But on a spectacle level, when the action scenes come, Chloé Zhao did a great job here. I also love the production design here, the design of the spaceship. So all in all, this is a huge invasion for Marvel. And I believe that this is not a misstep for Chloé Zhao. I really embrace the vision that she's presenting here. I think this movie could have been better if it served as a mini-series, but that being said, you will lessen the cinematic value of this movie if you chopped it into parts and, I don't know, give it lesser budget. But for a future film, I think Chloé Zhao really did a great job in covering all the bases, making sure that these newly introduced characters have their own backstories, their own personalities, and we have to tie up all of the narratives here and the subplots. The momentum kind of suffers because sometimes it feels one exposition after another, but I don't want Marvel to take away this whole insight with all the mixed reviews that we're having, that they just need to stick with the formula and be less experimentative when it comes to presenting stories of the superheroes. I think that will be the wrong decision. I'm also on board on giving Chloé Zhao a shot at the sequel, maybe learning some of her shortcomings. But anyway, I'm happy that we're getting a different flavor here from what we're used to, and to show that superhero stories are also capable of having deep, spiritual, cinematic retelling. So I think that's a really plus in my book. So I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 stars. That is not me being generous, but I can actually watch this movie twice or thrice more. So yeah, that's it for my review of Eternals. How about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comment sections down below. If you don't agree with me, that's okay. But also don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't yet for weekly reviews of movies and TV shows. Thank you so much guys for watching. Until then, I'll see you all on the next one.